Good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie in the workshop, and it's a beautiful day in Nebraska. Good day to start a new carving project. And this one is going to be on a Spectacled Eider Drake. Very unique bird. I've only carved one Spectacled Eider Drake in my carving career, and that was just this last year. I carved a pair of specs along with a King Eider Drake, bundled those together in my world rig, and ended up taking home second best in world with that rig. So this is a bird that I'm going to do that's on the same pattern as that Spectacled Eider Drake I did for the world rig. Similar to the Gadwall series, I'm not going to go through every step of the way band sawing out the bird. I'll go ahead and cut it out, and we're going to focus on the things that are unique about the Spectacled Eider in terms of geometry. The head in particular is very unique, and we just can't start hacking on the head without some planning, because there are some very unusual features to the head that we need to pay attention to. The body, not so much. It's kind of a big, wide diver body, but we do have these thorn feathers up on top, and we're going to want to, there are some unique things, so I'll try to focus on those features again. If you're brand new to the channel, take a look, and you're not interested in a Spectacled Eider. Sometimes people just stumble upon the channel because it's carving related, but I have over 100 videos, how-to videos, focused on different species, so you may want to check those out in the playlist down below. That'll show you the key projects that we've put up on the channel, and hopefully one of those projects is helpful to you. The mallard in particular, the Drake mallard, I took that from beginning to end, from planning to band sawing to roughing to finishing. This one, again, I'm just going to jump into getting this band sawed. We'll jump right into the detailed carving of the head and roughing it out first, and then doing the detail. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. That helps me out. It doesn't cost anything. It's free. I'm providing this channel as a resource to people who might want to start carving or improve the carving they're doing. It's just a joy for me, and I enjoy providing these how-to videos, and hope they're helpful to some of you out there. So let's get started. Enough talking. All right, I've got the bird cut out, roughed out, taken a little bit off to round the body. Got my trusty Pat Godden pattern book back there, so it's available for reference dimensions. And then I've got all my reference pictures out here, so that before we start hacking on the head, I really want to understand, especially since this is a species that I'm not that familiar with, we really want to, and I encourage you to do the same if you can, get as many reference shots as you can from different angles. Front views are great. I'll just point out a few things that I see. These eye spectacle patches actually go up on either side, so there's a little bit of a groove between them on the top of the head. There's a little bit of a return that I see here on the bill. There's a great view underneath, and that tells me for painting later what's under here in terms of color. But it's also a great view to show this little area of the pooches out down here, and then this is this swollen area in front that's kind of like velvet, doesn't even look like feathers, and then this is the spectacle around the eye, and in between there's almost there is a depression down here, so we're going to want to carve that in, and then the crest flares out at back. You can see that from the front position as well. It flares out. Here's another view, different bird, flares out. So we're going to want to try to duplicate that. And here's, you can see there's a kind of a line of demarcation here between this crest shape here and these feathers that are joining it here. So I just wanted to encourage close observation of your reference materials. The other thing that I'll just point out, the color is all over the map on these birds. Look at this area from two aspects. This is a different time of year, so this area has gotten very dark and brown, and notice it's not swollen, so it's not coming up like the other ones did. The head is extremely wet on this bird, so that's another aspect you need to keep in mind, but there's that dark brown burnished. And you have to decide when you're carving your own decoy, what phase do I want to make my bird in. Here's another distinction I'll point out. In this phase, this particular bird's bill is very dull and fleshy colored, almost like human flesh. In this bird, it's a beautiful orange with more of just a flesh colored nail. Same here. Me, I like this bright color better than this, so I'll make that decision now that when I paint, I'm going to go for the brighter color. I also like this type of coloration on this swollen area above the bill more than this version where it's very dark brown. It's just personal preference, but I think it's good to look at all of these things, and you can see the different shades in these greens too. That's going to be interesting to paint. Very black around the eye. One other feature I wanted to point out is, I see this a lot, is there's a little bit of a line here behind the eye with this area pooched out a little, and that's a detail that I'm going to want to carve into the bird. You can see the eye is pretty elongated, another key feature. So that's probably enough study for now, but I just, there's another version with the eye in that shape. So we'll keep that in mind as we're carving the head. All those things in mind. Okay, let's go to the decoy. So given all of that reference input, we know this head is not shaped like a mallard, duh, but how is it shaped? And that's what we need to know as we're starting to carve. So I've got the pattern here, and the widest part of the head is way back here, as opposed to most ducks going to be a little closer behind the eye. And that corresponds to this part of the crest back here that drops down. And so what I'm going to do right now is take an awl and just using my pattern, and I did this on the previous decoy because the holes are still there. I'm going to put that in so I know right where that crest drops down according to my pattern. That will correspond to the widest part of the head from the top. And it looks like I've got that lined up pretty well, but I'll make a minor adjustment there to make sure when I drop that line, it lines up with the crest there. Do the same thing on the opposite side. I'm just using the holes that I used on the previous side, kind of lining those up so I know where that crest drops. Okay, and so if you look, if I carry this line up, I'm going to want to be about right here from the top view, not back here. So that seems like a subtle thing, but it really is a key thing, because if I would have cut that shape from the top and paid no attention, I'd be way back here with this line when I go to carve, and that would be a problem, because it wouldn't look like a spectacled eider then. It'd look like the Tom Christie version of a spectacled eider, which could be ugly. So I've made those adjustments. This is a long wedge shape up to the bill, and I used my profile pattern. I can't just lay it on there because this is done straight up and down. It's not done at an angle. So we can use it as a guideline. You definitely use it for the profile of the bill. Okay, and then in back, the crest is relatively round back here. So it's not going to come all the way back up. It doesn't come to a point. It's kind of a nice rounded shape back there. The other thing I've done with this particular pattern is cut out the spectacle, and I've taped it back together. But when it comes time to carve the spectacle, I can take the pattern apart and use that to trace around so that I get that spectacle the same shape and position on both sides. But that's for later. Now I'm set up, and I'm going to use my coping saw to make these two big cuts. And I want to use the coping saw. You could use the bandsaw for this, but I want to keep an eye on what's going on underneath. And that's hard to do on the bandsaw. So I'm just going to take my time. This will take longer with the coping saw, but I'm more comfortable that I'll get a better result. And I want to make sure I don't undercut that neck area too far. Let me just swing the camera around and I can show you what I'm talking about underneath there. I don't want to cut into that neck, so it looks like I'm lined up just about right, so I don't do that. And I'm heading for this line where I need to come out down here. I'll just speed this up so we can get through the rest of this cut quickly. And then I'll be doing the same thing on the opposite side. But you can see I missed the neck, and that's what I wanted to do. So I'll get the next side done, and then we'll do the back on the bandsaw. Just going to carefully cut those corners off the back, and keep in mind we want a rounded shape back there, so I'm not taking a lot off. That should do it. You can see the eider has kind of an angular shape to its head from the front, and but before we just cut too deep here, it also has these eye patch projections. So I'm going to go to the outside of the eye patch so that we leave enough material there. And I'm using Pat's book to get a reference dimension on the width over the eyes. I've penciled that on here. So the first step, I want to take some material off down to that angle, to this width. Then we can begin to define where things are here. We're closer to the shape. Notice there is no notch on the bill, and normally I would locate a notch to begin the bill. In this bird, this swollen area over the bill, whatever the technical name for that is, covers any kind of an attachment point. So, okay, this video is at 2 times speed, and I'm using that 3/4 inch saber tooth burr, fine tooth, and just beginning to angle toward that guideline that I put along the top, and we'll see that here in a minute. But I'm just going to create a bevel on each side to narrow the head down to where the eye patch needs to be, or the spectacle patch. And I'm going ahead and rounding the rear of the crest there at the same time. But you can see I'm not digging in to create a cheek like a lot of other decoys. Instead, I'm using the bullet end of that to begin to define where that crest is going to drop down the side of the face. Just as we're carving deeper and deeper, I want to keep that line in mind. And I'm also using this bit to kind of pre-round the bill. I'm just angling that down to hit that top guideline, so I'm at the proper width between the two spectacle patches on either side, and then rounding the back like I talked about. There I'm defining where that crest is, not trying to finish that, just keeping it in front of us so I don't lose my pencil guideline there. And we'll continue to work that and shape it, but that becomes kind of an anchor point that I don't want to lose. So you can see I'm narrowing the top of the head. Down to those guidelines. Once we get this narrowed, then we can do a little more layout work and begin to define the different parts of the head. I'm going to stop right there and let's do some layout work. All right, we're approaching this slowly as I mentioned, but we've got the head narrowed a bit at the top to begin an angle here. And now there's enough shape to the head. I think we can use the pattern, and I've cut out the eye patch to make it easier to locate things. And I'm going to sketch in the location of the eye patch. If I can hang on to this template. This is rough. And then I also want to, while I'm here, go ahead and locate where this velvet cover over the bill comes down. I didn't do a very good job there, so I'll redo that. I carved a little bump in the top of the head there to give myself a guideline. I know that's exactly where the eye patch comes up. Same thing back here. I know it comes out right there. Now let's do this a little deeper this time. And I know it goes right up to the tip of the bill. On this angle and matches up with the bill up there. Same thing over here. I'll just speed through this side. Same process. It's a little awkward to use this pattern on a shaped surface like this, but it's a lot better, in my opinion, than just eyeballing things. It's easy to get off on symmetry from side to side, and this kind of assures that you've got good symmetry. And then the crest comes down right off the back of the eye patch. So up here, matches up down here. Same thing on this side, back of the eye patch, down. And then we've got this area that's concaved in here, and a little bit of a cheek down below. I'm just going to sketch that in, looking at my pattern. And this is that area on some of the reference that we saw was kind of bulged out. This will all be concaved. Same thing here. So this will be down, down, down. So we're starting to get a sense for where things line up. And here are those lines up here where the eye patch comes up above, and this will end up, these are raised, so I'm going to leave those where they are, and there'll be an area between that we carve down to follow this profile and leave these up raised. A lot going on. The other thing you can see in this reference picture is this bill width then gets a little wider down here, but basically we're coming back from this width and not getting a lot wider down here. So we're going to want to remove material here to maintain that width back to the point where it kind of disappears under this overlying feather group. Get one more layout detail, the bill from the tip to where it disappears underneath here. Just going to put a reference mark on here so I kind of keep that in mind. That's kind of where that's going to end up. Do that on both sides so we know where that point should be. That's where the lower mandible goes in and disappears under this overlying velvet. I also penciled in the eye width up here, just to keep that in mind as I'm looking at how wide things need to be. We're going to want to set the eyes in to that depth. So I want to leave enough material that we can do some of those sculptural things around the eye that we saw in the reference photos. Now I'm going to use this 1/4 inch cylindrical burr, and we're going to do a lot of shaping of the layout work that we've done. So I'm going to keep this at normal speed. The first thing I want to do is separate the eye patches there, and I got a dimension off my pattern, so I know it's about 3/8 of an inch between those points. So I'm digging down a little bit, and then I'm going to remove that material in the canyon between the eye patches there and follow the profile of the head around in that area. So we'll leave those eye patches raised on either side. And then I'm kind of rounding down into that. So you can see there's a little bit of a groove there. I'll speed the video up eventually to get through this quicker, but I think there's so much carving going on that it may be valuable just to see this in normal speed as I talk through it. So now I'm going under that, I'm going to call it the saddle, just for lack of a better word. And I'm beginning to round the bill and then dig underneath the saddle so that we narrow the back part of the bill as it approaches the face to the proper width. And now I'm going to kind of follow that line around the spectacle eye patch and begin to lower this saddle area in front of the eye patch so that we can leave that eye patch raised and around its edges. And so I'm using that to take that saddle down so it's not so bulky. We want it nice and full, like it's fluffed up and swollen, but we don't want it too massive. And we need to create some lift in the eye patch area. So I'm taking that area down a little bit in front of it. Now I'm going to the back part of the eye patch and beginning to define the edges back there, and then we'll tie that into the line up above. So in order to do that, I need to take some material off the top of the eye patch and narrow that down. And that'll help us form that triangular or angular shape from the front that we saw in the reference photos as well. I'm just going under that saddle to create that ridge that I can round, and then defining the lower part of the eye patch, and then that little cheek, I'm calling it a cheek area, that's bumped out down below. Now I'm rounding the saddle. And I think that gives you a good idea of the speed that I'm carving, and I'll go ahead and speed the video up so we can get through the rest of this a little quicker. So now I'm tying that eye patch into that concaved area up above. Continuing to round. Now I want to define that neck line down below and a little bit of the cheek as it comes around the side of the face there. Just continuing to define the eye patch, round the edges, and make sure that it sticks out away from the rest of the head so it's prominent. So I'm taking that area down where the crest is on the back of the head, behind the eye patch. So there's some definition there. We can thin that head up and continue to make the head kind of that angular shape that we saw from the front. I'm working on that crest area. This is very much a sculpting process, just removing wood. Around the eye patch. I'll have to refine all of this to make sure the shapes are right, but this is just the rough geometry that I'm creating. So I like to pencil things in periodically so I can take a look at how things, makes it easier to see things. That area between the eye patch and the cheek down below is pretty narrow. So now I'll work on the opposite side, do the same. So I've got the opposite side roughed, and now I'm moving to a bullet-shaped ruby bit. This is probably a medium or normal grit ruby. and I'm using this to just further shape things up. That round point makes it nice to get into areas like this and just generally round things and remove the grinding marks. That'll minimize the amount of sanding that we have to do later. So I'll speed through the rest of this because it's just going over the same areas that we ground and smoothing things out. And with the round shape, I can get in and shape up the bill better than I could with the cylindrical burr. And define that little area where there's a little return on the bill that I talked about from our reference as it goes up into the saddle area. Just in general, smoothing things out now, and there'll be more work to do on this, but I still call this roughing work. So that's looking pretty decent overall. I'll re-pencil because we've got to keep working on these shapes. All right, we've got the head roughed, very roughed out, but starting to get some of the shapes down, and I think we'll call that a day and work on the details in the next session. All right, well, thanks for tuning in to this session 1 of carving a Drake Spectacled Eider. We've got the head very rough shaped, and in the next session we'll refine that. There's not a lot of build detail on this decoy because much of that is hidden under this big velvety saddle that goes over the bill. But we'll refine these details, get ready for eye insertion, probably start roughing out the body in the next session as well. But until then, Tom Christie signing out. Have fun with your carving. See you next time.